davening in the morning, about 11 o'clock, 11:30, I learn with my students I have there until about 1 o'clock. And the students I have there I don't have here. I have grown men over there. One of my students is a judge. He's on the bench. And the other one is Mr. Samuels, and he comes here sometimes. And Mr. Harris. Now I'm getting others too. But the important thing is this. I teach, in other words, 6 times a week. And it's not because I have to have glory or anything.
You enjoy it.
Well, not only enjoy it, it's my responsibility as a rabbi to not only learn Torah, but since I have, thank God, the competence, I also have to teach Torah. A Jew that does not do what he can do in relation to serving God is not treating God's Torah in the proper way. He's sinning against God. I don't want to sin against God, and I would like to serve Him. And I'm asking all of you to come as many times as you possibly can. And we move the classes according to the sun. In other words, they get longer, we learn later. And if they get real long, then we learn before we daven mincha. At the same time, we try to keep up the minyan. We're doing a lot of mitzvahs. We come here, we give a little tzedakah and everything, and we daven to God. This is the way a Jew should live. If a Jew comes to shul in the morning and the night and davens in the shul, God blesses him, among other things, with long life. I'm sure that's something you can use. In addition to that, if a Jew comes and does other mitzvahs that you do in the shul, and where you do, we learn Torah, he blesses you with tremendous things. Among other things, you could go to heaven. I think that's a wonderful, wonderful thing for a Jew to work for. And that's not something that you turn aside and throw away. And as long as God gives me the strength and the health, I will certainly engage in this activity because it's a holy activity. Because only for the grace of God, I would know nothing about the Torah. Now, for instance, this week we have the Seder Shmos, the beginning of the second book of the Bible, Exodus. It talks about the Jewish people being enslaved in Egypt, and Moshe Rabbeinu being born, then growing up, and God designating him to lead the Jewish people out of Egypt. All right, now you have any questions, Michael, on this week that was the first of his brothers to die. He lived to be 110 years old. He was 30 years old when he was appointed Viceroy of Egypt. He was 39 years old when his father came to Egypt.
Who are you speaking of?
Joseph, the son, Joseph.
First son of...
No, Joseph was not the first
11th.
son. The 11th son, Jacob. And he became the one that interpreted the dream of Pharaoh and thereby was appointed to be the prime minister of Egypt. And he supervised the preservation of the food crops so that when they had famine, he could feed not only the Egyptians but all the surrounding countries that also had a famine. That was the way in which God brought the Jewish people down to Egypt. It starts out, the Jews were all together in Egypt 210 years. 210 years. Yes, there were over 600,000. When by the time Jacob died, there was already over 600,000. And for 17 years, in 17 years, God made miracle after miracle happen. There were the Jewish ladies were becoming pregnant, and they didn't have just a single birth. There's 2 medrashim. One medrash says they had 6 births at a time. And another medrash says they had 12 at a time. Now you can imagine if they had that within a very short time, the land would be tremendously filled with Jews. And that's exactly what happened. They became so populous that the Egyptians, besides every other reason, they decided they were fearful. And the Egyptians wanted to go and decrease Jewish population, so they hit on a scheme trying to drown all the Jewish baby boys. And he says, we got to go and kill them out because they might become plentiful. And God says, they are going to become plentiful. And God's will always prevails. We have throughout all the generations, we have people that think that they can go and defy Almighty God, either by direct defiance or indirect defiance, or somehow subverting what should be done. There's no way in the world that anybody can defy Almighty God. Either we conform to what He wants us to do, or He will dispense with us. He'll get rid of us. We are given a choice. If we live according to God's will, He'll let us live. Not only in this world, but in the world to come. If we choose not to live according to God's will, He will take us away. He is here. He's the boss. He's always been the boss. And it's only prudent, not even religious, it's a prudent thing for a person to serve God. And not only prudent, it is in madness not to try to serve God, because it's like a person cutting out his own life. Anybody that destroys his own life, would you consider him a person that's sane? That's not a sane person that undermines his own well-being is not acting in his best interest. And this is what the whole problem is. People don't appreciate that, in fact, you're playing with fire. You're playing with Almighty God. You can't antagonize Him, ignore Him, and expect that all of a sudden you're going to be immune from any... if anything, we can learn from the example of Pharaoh, the king of Egypt. He says, who is God that I should listen to Him? The Torah tells us who God was, and that why he should listen to Him. And anybody. So we have a measure that says, at the gates of hell, the soul of Pharaoh stands at the gates of hell, and he says to every wicked type, he says, why didn't you profit from my example? I went through all that. You have to go through the same thing? End up here too? You see, that's the whole... It's stupid. If a person can avoid being punished and could earn merits in which he can be blessed for all eternity, it's real stupid that you should go and act in such a way that in fact it should not happen. Isn't that right? Sure. This is the problem we have, and this is what we have to face. And we have certain problems. First of all, we have to motivate ourselves that this is in fact what the case is. Now, nobody lives forever. Every person, you had friends, you tell me you have friends, relatives passed away. When I was a younger man, I used to live in Hammond with my parents for many years, and I davened in the Hammond shul. They had a kosher Orthodox shul there for many years. My parents lived there I lived there for about 17 years before I got married. So I would daven in the shul, especially even when I was going to the yeshiva, I would go and stay there, daven in the shul when I came home. And when I go into the Hammond cemetery, it's very eerie, because there I walk in a row, and there I daven with this man that's dead, I daven with this man that's dead, and it's all long week. I come there, and it's very eerie. You know, if you live long enough, you see this thing, and you realize that every human being is mortal. If we're all mortal, doesn't it make sense that during the space of time that God allows us to live here, that we should maximize our efforts so that we can go and give a blessing not only to ourselves, because the Torah tells us, if you live a proper life, you will not only bless yourself, you'll bless all mankind, and you'll bless those that you love. And that's the way a Jew should live. A Jew should seek out opportunities to serve God in every area. But the first thing we have to do is become knowledgeable. Thank God, I have a little knowledge of this. I can go into the sources, and that's why I'm here. I'm here as an agent of God to teach you, and I hope that you will avail yourself of the opportunity. Even if you don't learn from me, learn from somebody else that's knowledgeable.
I will come back, Rabbi.
I'm not trying to push anything on you that you don't want.
No.
You got to want it. I can't do it for you. You know what I mean?
For the most part, it's interesting. When I didn't realize I was going to stay here this morning. I'm going to meet my wife at home.
Okay,
so
fine.
I'm going to go. But
that's the way it is. See, once I relate it to you intimately, you can understand what I'm talking about.
Sure.
Okay. You know, I got to talk to you in your language. Somebody go and sit on the bench. Rabbi, you go to Des Moines, you sit on an orchestra. There's somebody that's never played this is going to sit up there among you and start playing. Everybody in the orchestra would look at that guy. What kind of a nerve is this? This guy just can't even handle his instrument, let alone play with us. Meet such characters. They got chutzpah. They're going to sit among people that are practiced musicians and pretend that they are a practiced musician. You're not going to fool anybody. Right. And they sit among you, and you know right away, this guy is for the birds. Is that right? Hasn't it happened to you? Yeah. You sit there with these guys, and some guy comes in, I am qualified. It's a big deal, qualified. The base Rahmanis, he's messing it all up. You see, you made a big mitzvah today. You made the minyan. You keep it up. You keep working for mitzvahs, boy, because the more you do, the better you're doing for yourself and for all Jews. All right, be well. Yeah. All right, we have the Sedra. What other questions you have on this week's Sedra? We have tremendous things. For instance, I learned the Medrash Tanchuma. Moshe Rabbeinu, according to Rashi, Rashi quotes from the Medrash. Rashi says that Moshe Rabbeinu pronounced the name of God, Shem HaMeforish, Yud Kei Vav Kei, you understand? The four-letter name of God, and killed the Egyptian. You're not supposed to pronounce it in the way it's written. You always say Adonai. You understand? That's what he said. That's what Rashi quotes in the Medrash. That's what Moshe. But actually, there's another Medrash. The Medrash says he took a big piece of material and hit him over the head, killed him that way. So, if you would think, you look in Rashi, you'd think that this is the only way this could possibly be. Lo and behold, I learned to this week's Sedra that there is another that opinion there, because the other opinion says he didn't know the name the proper name of God, Shem HaMeforish, until he was older, when God told him the proper name. Because it was intended that he should not know it until he got older, so that when he did come back to Egypt and told the Jewish people that he had been appointed by God to lead Jewish people out, and he gave them a sign of that, and God told me his proper name. And the proper name was never given to a person that was too young. Always to a person that was older type, an older scholar. And since he left Egypt when he was a younger man, and he came back when he was older, was 80 years old, and at that point he would have no way of knowing what the proper name of God is unless God in fact told him. And so that, according to that medrash, he did not in fact know what the Shem HaMeforish was prior to that time. You understand? He killed the Egyptians because of what happened. The Egyptians done wonderful, horrible things. First of all, he raped this man's wife, the Jewish, and then he was beating up mercilessly this man when the man realized that his wife had been raped by this Egyptian taskmaster. Both things of which are quite improper. And since, unfortunately, there was no rule of law to protect the Egyptian slaves, then the Egyptian had to be killed because he was violating the law of God. You understand? Any human being that violates any of the 7 mitzvahs, the 7 commandments of the children of Noah, is subject to a capital punishment. And one of the things is that no human being is permitted to be improper sexual. Certainly to live with another man's wife is not a proper type of activity, sexual activity. You understand? Yeah. So you understand? So it was perfectly legitimate that he, of course, when Pharaoh heard about it, how did he hear about it? He told him. It's a mastering to the government, and so he was informer, which is a terrible crime in the eyes of God. But at any rate, so Pharaoh wanted to kill him. But God saved Moshe Rabbeinu's life. He was able to escape. Later on, when God approached Moshe Rabbeinu, not all. The tribe of Levi was not enslaved at any time. Moshe was in the tribe of Levi, because They were in Egypt living, but they weren't enslaved because they were the priests of the Jewish people, and what's more important, they were faithful to the Torah even before it was given. They were living according to the law the way they were the only tribe that was faithful. The rest of them were worshiping idols. Huh?
Weren't there a few of each tribe that like called Buddha?
Yeah, a few of the others, but most of the others were unfortunately worshiping, trying to imitate the Goyim, the Egyptians, and therefore they were enslaved as a punishment. Also, there was another reason given. We learned this week, Cedra, that in addition to it being a punishment, God decided to go and humble the Jewish people in order to make them worthy of receiving the Torah that he would give them after he freed them from Egypt. And in fact, that was happening. Any other questions this week, Cedra? Mr. Tyler, you have any questions? Oh, incidentally, Moshe Rabbeinu's parents did not call him Moshe. They called him Tov or Tuvia. There's difference in the Gemara what they called him. The only one that called him Moshe was the daughter of Pharaoh. But because she showed Rachmanis, the Medrash tells us, God chose that Moshe should be known by that name and that name alone. You understand? God welcomes people that show mercy. You understand? And he blesses them. The case of Basio, the daughter of Pharaoh, that saved Moshe and adopted him as her own. She was a woman that was afflicted with leprosy. At the time, she went down to the Nile to bathe when she discovered the baby Moshe. And when she touched that little basket Moshe, the baby was in, her leprosy was miraculously cured by God. She realized that Moshe was a holy person, and she always treated him with the greatest respect and the greatest honor. She knew he was a Jewish boy. Yeah, and because she treated him with such a tremendous thing, and she was herself a tremendous righteous type, she is one of some people that she walked into heaven alive. She merited to go to heaven alive. You know what I'm saying? Never die. Basio, the daughter of God in Hebrew. This is the daughter of the wicked Pharaoh. Would you believe it? See, if a person wishes, they can be as pious as you wish. On the other hand, if God forbid they don't, they could be very wicked. Any other questions? Moshe Rabbeinu was not only brought up in the palace of the king, but he knew who his parents were. And they also taught him for many years. So he was knowledgeable, in fact. And he was already, when you get to the point where God talks to you, you're in a very high degree of spiritual development. Yes.
I don't know, what is, look at Moshe, I am that I am.
Moshe wants to know the name of God. The Medrash tells us, God tells us, my name changes in accordance with what I am doing at the particular moment. If I am acting as a judge, then I am to be addressed as Elohim, God of justice. If I am acting in a merciful fashion, then I am to be called Rahum, the merciful one. And likewise, different other facets, whatever it is. In other words, it changes according to what God is doing at that particular time. But not at any time to equate the name with God, because the name is only to indicate that there is not lacking in the presence of God. That's the way the Rambam learns it. There's not lacking in the presence of God the feature of being a proper judge. There's not lacking in the feature of having mercy, the attribute of mercy, among other things. You understand? Well, you want to, according to our present year, they have postulations of when this would be. Our best educated guess at this point would be, according to the that we have today. You understand? This would go back. Let me see. We are in the English calendar. We have 1985, and then we have going back before the Common Era. It goes back an additional 1,350 years. So altogether, 1,350 and 1985 would go back about
33.
About 33 centuries ago. Okay? No, about 33 centuries ago,
Yeah.
if you go back 33 centuries, if it's now 5,745, and you take off, subtract 33 centuries from that,
From
so you have
57?
2245, approximately that year. Year 2245. So it goes back about 33 centuries. That was a time of TSP trial, approximately. Yeah, no, it's not too long. 33 centuries. It is some time ago. All right, what else? You have this week said this. Natalio? Incidentally, Moshe Rabbeinu's mother was 130 in fact she gave birth to Moshe. When Moshe was going out of Egypt. So therefore, the Jews were in Egypt. She was born just when they entered into Egypt. She was the daughter of Levi.
Why? No, I mean, I know he has some type of problem.
Speech impediment, yeah.
Speech impediment.
Why what? For what?
What he said.
He felt that he was really not qualified, and he felt also his brother was much more qualified than he was. His brother was already a prophet before they even left Egypt, before he became a prophet. And therefore,
I thought Miriam was...
Miriam was before that. But God says, why not my brother? My brother is much better qualified. He can speak good, and he's everything good.
I don't know. Where did Aharon first prophesy?
When they were still in Egypt, he told them to stop worshiping idols. If you look in the 20th chapter of Yechezkel, you'll find the prophecy of Aaron Akoin. 20th chapter of Yechezkel. Okay?
The whole chapter is Aharon?
No, you'll find it, a portion of it. You'll look at that, okay? All right, fine. Any other questions? Now, we mentioned all the names of the sons of Yaakov Avinu in Bereshit before. Here we start out Shmos, we mention their names again. So the question is, the Medrash asks the question, why repeat the names? And the answer is that these individuals managed to become as great, as pious as their father, Yaakov. All the sons of Yaakov were just as pious as their father. Yeah.
And he's telling them
What's going to happen?
what's going to happen.
Not only to them, it's going to happen thousands of years later. Yeah. You will last until the time of Mashiach. Yehuda says like this, in the case of Yehuda, that's right. Yehuda there, and not only that the Melech Mashiach will come from the tribe of Yehuda, because he will be a descendant of King David, who is of the tribe of Yehuda. And you should understand, in the end, the Medrash says there about wine and everything like that, it's talking about Yehuda will be immersed in learning Torah. And because you learn Torah, God will see to it that he will forgive you your sins. If you learn Torah, God will make the sins that are as red as scarlet, as white as snow, if you do tshuva. Because a person that learns Torah deserves to be given opportunities to repent. The more you learn Torah, the more you become one of God's people. And the more you live according to the Torah, the better and better you become qualified to be considered a righteous type. Yes.
But what happened to the tribe of Yisachar that was considered even more scholarly than Yehuda?
It didn't last that long. In case Yehuda, we're still here. We're for the tribe of Yehuda, we're still here. We're still learning Torah. Happened. Yeah.
How is it related to...
In Egypt, no. This is beyond it. This is going way beyond it.
Yeah.
You must understand something, and that's very prerequisite for the continued existence of Jewish people is an adherence and a fidelity to Torah and Torah principles. Unless a person learns and lives according to the Torah and the commandments, there's no way in the world that he can remain a proper Jew. You understand? That being the case, it is necessary before any of the wonderful things that God prophesied will happen to the Jewish people could happen, that they would receive the Torah at Mount Sinai through Moshe Rabbeinu. And in order for them to be worthy of receiving the Torah, they had to go through, according to Yofet Moshe Rabbeinu, they had to go through a period of Yisurim, of trials and tribulations. In this case, the Golos in Mitzrayim, the exile in Egypt, and the going through this period of slavery, which was intended not only to punish them for those that went away from Torah and mitzvahs, but also to condition them so that they become worthy of receiving the Torah by becoming humble. A person will not go and study Torah for three reasons. Either because he wishes to do his will and not the will of God, or because he doesn't believe that God will bless him, or because he's lazy. Comes God and says, I am going to make conditions such that not only the Jews will be humbled, so they won't want to do their thing, but rather to do what I want them to do, because I will make their lot so miserable that they will realize that the only way we can go and be a free people is to show fidelity to God. And they will have faith in me because they'll see the miracles that I do when I redeem them. And they will have enough strength of character not to be lazy in the service of God, because they'll realize that if they are not, in fact, faithful in the service of God, they can relapse again into slavery. The curse of a wicked person is that he becomes a slave to his passion. And the blessing of a righteous person is that he masters his passion. Ezel Gibor, who is a strong person, a person that can conquer his passion. And this is what the Torah gives us, the weapon. The Gemara says in Kedushin and Baba Baba, God created this remedy. That's the only thing that you can do to combat that passion nature in person. If you do what you're supposed to do, you can go and function as a person that serves God. If you do not study the Torah, and if you do not live according to the Torah, you become a slave to your own passion, and you are led further away from the proper way. Jew must all times become the type of person that really deserves to be blessed, because that's what God had in mind for us. Any questions? Any time a Jew does not live according to Torah and mitzvahs, he is in fact a slave. You don't have to go back and live in this present generation. A person becomes enslaved to his passion. Haven't you seen people? You can see when a person does excesses in becoming dependent upon drugs or alcohol, how horrible their life is, and how horrible they make their life for everybody else. Anytime a person does not live according to Torah principles, he becomes enslaved. This is not something that happened 33 centuries ago. It happens today as well. Let's not fool ourselves. If we don't learn the lesson of the older generations, we are doomed to repeat it in every generation. We have to understand, learn lessons from these things. If we are faithful to God's Torah, God will allow us to remain free. And Ezel Ben Chorin, who is a free person? A person that engages in the learning of Torah. That says in the beginning of the sixth chapter in Pirkei, in the first second brisa there, in the Siddur, you have it here. It says like this, wait, the Lashon here. And the second brayta says like this: every day there is a voice from heaven coming from the mountain of Sinai. My presence for Americans makes a public announcement and says, Oilam Labrios, human beings, that they do not go and are diligent in the study of Torah. It's an abomination of some kind. Never invented a golden ring in the nose of a pig. Ishiyok, a woman, beautiful otherwise, but she gives a bad smell. Omer, he says, Aluchos Maaseh Elohim Hemo. The tablets were the work of God. They're talking about 10 Commandments. Amiktov Mikhu, and the writings were the writings of God. Chorus Aluchos, carved out on this tablet. Al Tikre Chorus, don't read it carved out, El but read it freedom. You don't have a person that is truly free, only a person that learns, is engaged in learning of Torah. You hear that? And he goes on to say, and anybody that is engaged in learning of Torah, he is always going higher and higher in spiritual development. Shenemar, we have a passage, a posik in the Chumash. When you get the gift, Nachaliel, you inherit God. When you inherit God, you must understand something. There's no accident. If a person becomes a righteous type, it's because he puts the time and the effort and the sweat and the tears. In order to become a true mentor, you have to become a true Yir Shamayim, a true fear of the Lord. And the only way you become a true fear of the Lord is become a humble person. You must be humble. Now there are some people that have to be humble like God, as God did with the Jewish people at the time of Egypt. He humbled them in order that they should be fit to get the Torah. You understand that? And any person, individually, a Jew that wants to become a mentor must humble himself. He must seek the Torah wherever he can find it. He must seek the teachers that will teach him. He must seek to put in the effort and the time to learn laboriously. And there's no question about it. Every beginning are difficult. And certainly learning of God's Torah is very difficult indeed. And even if you learn for many years, it still remains many times very difficult. You can even learn, even if I continue, I learn sometimes very difficult to understand what it is. And sometimes there are certain phraseologies that are difficult to understand. So there's lots to learn, a lot to keep on the memory, and to repeat and learn and review. And there's no room for complacency, and there's no room for mediocre effects. We have to do our level best to affect our performance so that we can legitimately be entitled to the blessings that God wishes to pour upon us. Any other questions this week, said there? There's so much to learn. It's like an ocean. Everything here in the Chumash is explained by various. We have a Midrash, Gemara, that explain everything that's mentioned here. Of course, you have the English translation. Rashi gives you many of the sources, but he's not exhaustive. He doesn't cover everything. You have to go to the Midrashim and everything else in the Gemara to really understand the whole broad picture. And the more you learn, the more you see in it. Thanks God. All right, is there anything more? Then we'll hold this point. Okay? Call us here. All right? Okay, fine. All right.
So tonight, Friedlander, we'll discuss Parshas Va'era, the second Sedra, and Sefer Shmos. And first of all, anybody has any shilas on this week's Sedra? Michoel, what's your shilah? Ask it. Don't worry about it. We're not standing on ceremony. We want to understand what in fact it means.
In reading the Sedra, it says that God hardens Pharaoh's heart and keeps sending these curses upon Egypt.
Yes.
And one time after the other, he hardens Pharaoh's heart. Okay, but at the same time, he knows that he's punishing him for something that is hardening his heart for?
Right.
I'm trying to understand it.
All right. Baruch Hashem, the same Shaila was asked last year, and I recall, and the year before that. And I believe you were one of the men that asked it. But that's all right.
Maybe I'm...
That's nothing wrong with asking the question. I think it's a beautiful question. He will attempt to answer the Shaila.
No, I'm not going to answer it.
He's going to not only attempt, he's going to be successful in answering. Shaila, what's your answer?
Okay, well, it's not mine, it's yours.
My answer. Oh,
God gives everybody a chance to have everybody to have a free choice. Otherwise, you know.
But is it free?
Well,
let me
listen,
finish.
listen.
Everybody gets a free choice. God doesn't choose a life for anybody. A person chooses his own life, and he can have a chance to make his own source. Everybody has the opportunity to make life good for themselves or bad for themselves, depending how they want it. If Paro, when it starts out, it says Paro hardened his own heart. Until the plague of Kinim, it says Paro hardened his own heart. What am I saying? First it starts out, he hardened his own heart. He made the choice not to do the right thing, not to do what God wanted. He chose not to let Bnei Yisrael go out of Mitzrayim. This was his own choice for a number of plagues.
But then it continued.
Wait, Himalaya, you have an observation?
Yeah, like, okay. At this point, magicians said this is the finger of God, meaning they knew that witchcraft doesn't have any power over something as small as life. They knew this is only from God, and this is truly God doing it.
Yeah.
I want you to go and if you can, tell us the 10 plagues that occurred in Egypt in the order they occurred.
In Hebrew?
First in Hebrew, and then perhaps in English.
Okay, the answer.
All right, now start.
Okay.
Blood,
Frogs, Kinim,
light.
the mixture of animals.
Is that the order way how to encourage a Jew to come? A Jew is now very important. The man was on, he has to go and make a living.
Yeah.
And he cannot come to shul and the prophet. So even though he said, but it'll be spent, it'll be late. I said, that's true. But at least you'll get the reward for coming to. So what's so terrible? I told him that, and he felt bad. I said, that's good. As good as you felt bad, you shouldn't feel too bad because you can't help it.
You were telling him what he wants from himself. What does he want from himself?
That's right. Now I talked to a Jew.
It was so excellent. It made him feel like you made him feel so good because you made it like.
The kunst is to make a Jew feel good, not to make his life a finster. He's got enough stories. He needs help. You understand, Moshe? You understand? You don't with your mouth hurt you.
Okay.
All right, now.
Oh, you're all doing tshuva.
No, wait. Now, I want, would you get me the big sitter, please?
I'll tell you the order they really are.
All right, first.
Dam, Sephardeas, frogs, Kinim is lice,
Yeah.
Arab mixture of wild animals, Dever, the plague, the Shrin, boils, Arba, locust, Choshech is darkness, and Makas B'chon. Now you open that, and I'm going to tell you the 10 right there. Wait, hold on. I'm going to do this. Don't show me anything, okay? And I'll prove to you once and for all that I know the 10 plagues I have. The brachas are another thing. Plagues are not.
That'll be sufficient for other purposes. We have it.
Okay, can I do it now? Okay.
Yeah.
Sephardeia, Dever, Shoros.
Right. And we're talking about the 10 plagues that God brought upon the Egyptians because they had enslaved the Jewish people and refused to let them go. Now, the shaila in front of us is that after what plague?
I think after
Yeah.
After the 5th plague.
Right.
Not before, until after the 5th plague.
Right.
That's what I wanted to be clarified in your own mind when this occurred. Now we have a phenomenon. For the first 5 plagues and the last 5 plagues, all right, Batalio, what's your observation?
I remember, I think you're telling me that for the first 2 plagues, Pharaoh thought that Moses was a great magician, or at least he could be. And for the 3rd one, and lights, when he knew a magician can't, for lights to appear at moment's notice, he knew that it had to be from God. So then God gave him 2 extra plagues, a total of 3 warnings before he...
You understand that? You understand what this is? What it's saying?
Yes.
In order for a person to be judged as being remiss in relation to the will of God, he has to have warning. God is fair. In addition to being just, God is fair. He does not take unfair advantage of his creatures. of a human being. So when the Egyptian Pharaoh could make a mistake and say, this is another witchcraft, therefore he was perhaps legitimately, or not legitimately, no good reason why he had enslaved people, but solid.
But God did not harden Pharaoh's heart to the extent that he couldn't do tshuva.
Hardened it to the extent that he would revolt and suffer the full consequences of his prior
But
hardness.
it wasn't a total block off of free will.
It was almost. The thing is,
How can he repent?
he could just stop what he was doing. He was defying the will of Almighty God. Nobody.
Any given done what?
Wait, listen very carefully. It says that God hardened the heart of Pharaoh. It didn't say that the hearts of his servants yet. And they could have stopped it, as they did once before. They were the ones, we have a measure of them, you've got to stop it because Egypt is destroyed.
And that's why
In other words, people that had until the last one. What happened was that after Joseph, this is one. After Joseph, they wanted to enslave the Bnei Israel, and so they went to Pharaoh and said, "So are you insane? Look what Joseph did for us and everything." And they said, "You're not Pharaoh anymore until you agree to do it." For 2 months he held out. Okay, enslave them. And
So Nebuchadnezzar was reluctant to go and enslave the Jewish people because he realized
The same
the
power.
fact was though that people had the right, people had the ability to overthrow Pharaoh. It was like a revolution.
Yeah, you understand?
If they wanted to,
All right.
they didn't.
Well,
Wait.
you taught me that
Baruch Hashem,
God
I'm being quoted all
allows-
over the place. What?
for you to have the free choice, the free will.
You have to have freedom.
Okay, one more
Answer
thing
the
before I answer the question. It says at the end of this week's Sedra, and Pharaoh's heart was hardened, and he wouldn't send them they saw from Egypt. And that was after already the seventh plague.
Yes.
So then he still, then the seventh plague, it says that Pharaoh's heart was hardened by himself.
Look, the question.
Oh, but by other places it says, let me elaborate on the question, so as for a fuller understanding of the subject matter at hand.
Okay, fine.
Okay. In other places it says, and Pharaoh's heart was hardened in the same way. Here it says the end of Pharaoh's heart was hardened, and that was at the end of the seventh plague. So even at this point, his heart was hardened. It doesn't say God hardened his heart. It says his heart was hardened, meaning he hardened his own heart. He's the one who didn't want them, and he wouldn't let them go. And this is after the sixth plague, the seventh plague.
All right, I want to ask you a question. Can anybody give an answer to that? All right,
Okay,
solid.
I'll give one following history.
All right.
The one following history is that being the third plague that Pharaoh, being the second plague where, you see, the sixth plague is the first one where God hardened Pharaoh's heart.
Yeah.
After that, according to Moshe's reasoning, God gave him another chance.
Why should we postulate that God gave Pharaoh a second chance to go and do it? Why? What occurred in the interim time that we should postulate? Because the evidence is an acknowledgement that God is the tzaddik, and I and my people are the rishonim. Once a person evidences a desire to do tshuva, a person that comes to purify himself, the Gemara says, God helps them. So therefore, perhaps you could even say that
It's right afterward.
that may in fact be a time when he is again trying to go and show a thing. But unfortunately,
See, God gives a chance for everybody to do tshuva, and without exception, including Pharaoh, Mitzrayim, he had a chance to do tshuva.
on the first instance, before any of the plagues started, that it will ultimately result in him losing his own firstborn son.
Why doesn't Moshe ask him to do tshuva? Or
He
did
did.
every time. He said,
He says, how long? Don't you realize that you can't get away with it?
but see, in the
But
end,
does Moshe explain to Pharaoh to do tshuva that
Of course.
this would change everything?
Obviously.
everybody has the capabilities of recognizing God and the existence of God. Otherwise, you can't punish somebody for not recognizing the existence of God.